I'm Tony Dungy, and welcome to the Football Night in America podcast. We are coming to you talking some Week 2 football. I've got my friend and co-worker in the studio, Jason Garrett, with me. And Jason, good to have you, and I can't wait to talk some ball.
Coach, great to be here with you.
Well, I think the big story for all of us, Jason, in Week 1 was Caleb Williams in this rookie quarterback class. 12 quarterbacks picked, or excuse me, 6 quarterbacks picked in the first 12 picks of the draft, and we couldn't wait to see them come out, but they didn't exactly light it up, did they? So, as a quarterback coach, give me your impressions of Week 1 for those young guys.
Coach, I just think it's hard. It's hard for these guys. I don't care how good a college player you were, what level of competition you played out, how many Heisman trophies you won. The National Football League is different than college football. So every one of these guys is going to have a big transition. And, sometimes people who follow football, you get a little bit skewed by CJ Stroud having a great rookie year. Or, we had Dak Prescott in Dallas in 2016, or Ben Roethlisberger had a great rookie year. These are the exceptions. There are some amazing quarterbacks, Hall of Fame quarterbacks who struggled early on. I played with Troy Aikman. I wasn't with the Cowboys yet, but he was 0-11 as a rookie. And my memory of John Elway, one of the all-time greats, was lining up under the guard. And
It's funny you mentioned that because I was coaching on the other side of the field in that game. It was John Elway's first game. I'm a young DB coach with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's the first pick in the draft, and we're opening up against them. He lined up behind the guard, then had to move over to the center. John dropped back 12 times in that game, Jason. 4 sacks, 1 completion, 1 interception, and it was just horrible. So everybody said, "Oh, maybe he's not as good." He wasn't that good, but it's tough making that jump.
Absolutely. And he's on the Mount Rushmore quarterbacks. He's one of the all-time great
Yeah.
players. And what he did for the Broncos for all those years, taking them to the Super Bowl. But, and he was a great college player. But, just this transition to the NFL, it's different. And the biggest thing for me is I wish everybody would just kind of pull back and say, hey, guys, it's going to take time. Those other guys are the exceptions. They're not the rule. And there's going to be a period of transition for these guys, and oftentimes they go to the worst teams in the league. And the
Yeah,
Bears,
that's another handicap
yeah.
usually. Now you
And I think good
mentioned you
things are
coached.
happening for the Bears, but they've won 10 games in the
Yeah.
last 2 years, and they've tried to surround him with good offensive players, but it's going to take time. He looked like a rookie. He was looking
Yeah.
down at the rush. He was getting the balls were batted. He was trying to get out of the pocket, and everybody was chasing him down. So he's going to learn the lessons. He wants to be a great player. He's going to work at it. They're going to create a good environment for him going forward. But it's hard for these guys. And anybody who has success, that's the exception, not the rule.
You're right, and we can look at the other 2 guys, Jayden Daniels and Bo Nix. They had excellent preseasons. Everybody's fired up, and I think between the 3 of those guys, no touchdown passes, very little scoring, and it's just different. Now all of a sudden you're seeing the real defenses and not the vanilla defenses. You're seeing the starting players, and it's moving faster. And all 3 of these guys, it's going to be a learning process.
No doubt. And years ago, you know this better than I do, but it used to be in the preseason, you would get absolutely everything was vanilla. It was a vanilla front, vanilla coverages. Coaches wanted to evaluate their players, they didn't want to scheme it up. I think there's more scheming going on in the last 10 years. There's a little blitzing going on and a little bit of that, but still, it's nothing like a regular season game plan. And, you're one of the great defensive coaches of all time. You guys do an unbelievable job saying, okay, this is what they do well. This is what they don't do well. We're going to take away this. We're going to make them do this. And that's what these coordinators do. The coaching in the NFL is really good. So it's not only the players and how much faster the game is and how much faster everybody is. It's also the coaches scheming you up and taking away a lot of the things that you can do well. And so those are the lumps that he's going to feel. All those rookie quarterbacks are going to feel here, certainly early on in the career, but they got to fight through it. That's really the only way to get it. And I do think the coaches making concerted effort to put him in a favorable situation to take some burden off of him is a big part of the transition.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned you coached Dak Prescott, and he was one of those guys that did have a great first year. What did you do for Dak to set him up and to help him grow?
You know, Coach, we drafted Dak in the fourth round, and it was after a year where Tony Romo had gotten hurt. So we had a deal where, okay, we got to find a guy who can be the next quarterback of the Cowboys. Tony's getting older; he's still the quarterback, but who's the next one? But we also was like, hey, we need a guy who can go in and play, as a capable backup. And at the time, Tony was our starter, Kellen Moore was our backup, and we drafted Dak in the fourth. And for me, I got the evaluation wrong on Dak. I thought Dak could be the starting quarterback of the Cowboys for a long time. He had all the traits that you wanted, all the traits that we've seen over these last number of years. But one of the concerns I had was, okay, how quickly can he play? Because he's been in a shotgun offense. He's done a lot of quarterback zone read type stuff and been a very successful player at Mississippi State. But we're going to get under center. We're going to have a more traditional NFL offense. How is he going to be able to transition to doing that? And sure enough, Kellen Moore gets hurt in training camp. Third preseason game, we go to Seattle. Tony Romo scrambles left, and he gets sacked from behind and hurts his back. And now all of a sudden we turn to Dak. It's like, okay, you're in. And I'll never forget it. It was a 3rd and 6, and that was at the time, Coach, when guys were still playing everybody in the preseason. So this is 2016. The Legion of Boom is still around. All those Chancellors playing, and Richard Sherman, and all those Bobby Wagner. All these guys are playing on that defense, and Dak goes in on the 3rd and 6, and he drops back. He looks left. It's not there. He turns back, and boom, complete poise, throws it to Beasley. Beasley makes a first down, and we all look at each other like, wow. And then he went and played really well for us the rest of the preseason and played great in the regular season. I thought Scott Linehan, our offensive coordinator, did a great job each week giving him stuff he could handle. And then as we went during the season, it grew and grew and grew. And I thought it was a real organic process where he evaluated it and said, okay, he can handle this. What's the complement? Can he do this? And we had a good team around him. We had a good offensive line. Zeke was a tremendous runner, Jason Witten, Des Bryant. So it was a good environment, but Dak played remarkably well for us. And I do think creating a comfortable environment where things that he could do and played to his strengths were a big part of his success. And I credit Scott Linehan, our offensive coordinator, for doing that.
Yeah. We mentioned 6 first-round picks this year at quarterback. 3 of them started day one. 3 of them are not starting. And I had an experience one time with a rookie quarterback, Sean King, in 1999 with us in Tampa. We're starting Trent Dilfer. We drafted Sean. He was a winner at Tulane. We knew he was going to be a good player. Well, we get some injuries the same way you did, but it's midway through the season, and now Sean comes in. He's had a chance to look at things a little bit. We cut the playbook down and, again, focus on the things he could do. We had a great defense. And Sean didn't have to carry us. He had a tremendous year, took us to the NFC Championship game. But what's your thought? Some people now put that young quarterback in right away and let him go. Some people let him watch and learn. What is your thought as a quarterback coach?
Well, I do think every situation is different, but I think the ideal scenario for me would be to let him sit and watch. And I think about what Andy Reid did with Patrick Mahomes. They made a concerted effort to go get Patrick Mahomes in that draft. They thought he was going to be great, but they said, hey, you're going to sit and watch for a year and watch Alex Smith play quarterback. And you're going to learn and you're going to grow in practice. And then when you get a chance to play, you're going to be that much more ready. And, I think about Aaron Rodgers. He didn't play till the middle of year 4. Mm-hmm. Tony Romo didn't play till the middle of year 4. So a lot of these guys get a chance to develop an armor about them, to say, okay, I know what to do. I've seen that. I'm learning from other people's mistakes or the things they do well. And when it's my time, I'm gonna be that much further along. There's nothing like experience. There's nothing like taking those snaps yourself. But if you're more prepared mentally, you've seen more things on the side, I just think it gives you a better chance to have success. Now, your old guy Peyton Manning would say, hey, I would never take back my rookie year. I threw 28 interceptions, but those are valuable experiences for me. And I think that's probably typical of him. That's his competitive nature. But sometimes I think if you can create an environment where they can watch for a little bit, I just think they can develop on the side and be that much more ready for the challenges.
No question. You mentioned Andy Reid, and Andy saw that was the Green Bay way of doing things, and he saw that work out really well. Brett Favre comes there. Andy's an assistant coach there. Brett doesn't play right away. Don Mikowski's playing. Brett learns. He comes in and plays great. And as you mentioned, they did that with Aaron Rodgers. They did it with Jordan Love. Well, Andy went to Philadelphia. He drafts Donovan McNabb, does the same thing. No, I'm going to start Doug Peterson. Donovan, you watch, you learn. Worked out really well for Donovan. Did the same thing with Patrick Mahomes. So it's a good system. But I think you're right. You have to know your quarterback too. You talked about Peyton, and he did. He had a tough year, but we both know Peyton Manning, mentally tough guy. He is not going to let the booze bother him. He's not going to let the 28 interceptions bother him. He could handle that. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody
Right.
can have that type of year and stay with it.
And especially in this day and age, coach, where everything is so immediate and there's so much racket out there in the world that people have to deal with, and social media and commentary and all of that stuff, those are just other forces on the situation. If you can protect your guy and all the while he's developing on the side, your extra meeting time, practice reps, all of those things add up a little bit. If you can just get them a little further along to handle the challenges, I do think it benefits them.
Well, we've got you mentioned social media and all that. We've got CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams. How do you think this is going to be Sunday night and play out? Caleb Williams going in knowing, hey, CJ lit it up last year and set the bar. I'm competing against this guy. Do you think he'll just be himself, or is there that little extra inside the quarterback that says, I want to show people I'm just like CJ?
I used to always think it was important for quarterbacks to know that they were playing against the defense. Sometimes, right? I mean, sometimes you can get caught up in this quarterback battle that the outside world, hey, it's CJ Stroud versus Caleb Williams. It's actually Caleb Williams versus the Houston defense and CJ versus the Bears defense. And I always thought that was important to remind those guys of that. It's a different situation. You're playing against these guys. We have a certain environment around you. They have a certain environment. Let's not compare. And I know the competitive juices get flowing, but the biggest thing for the Bears is, hey, Caleb, we got to get you to a point where you're playing the game at a higher level. Forget the guy who's playing quarterback on the other side. And I think that's what they'll try to do. And I think the biggest thing is to spread the burden around. Simsy and I talked about this on the show the other night. I think it's important. The easiest down to throw on in the NFL is first down. The hardest down to throw on is third down. And so sometimes people get into this rhythm of, hey, we're going to help our young quarterback. We're going to run it, and we'll get them to third manageable. Well, okay, even if you do a good job, you're going to have a 3rd and 3 that you're going to have to make. And so if you can give him some first down completions, particularly where he can make first downs, if you can make first downs on first down against run defenses throwing the ball, that's a really good rhythm to get into. It's going to give you more plays. Then you can get the run game going, and you're attacking the defense different ways. And I think that's something that the Bears can do. On the flip side, CJ Stroud has been so impressive, and they've added a lot of pieces. Having Mixon there and Diggs, that's going to help them. I do think that over the course of the year, they're going to face more challenges than last year, because a lot of teams just study them. And okay, Houston, we didn't know who they were last year. Now we do. Threat. So now what do they do well? Let's take that away. I think they're going to face those things as this season goes on. And even though I think they've improved their talent, their schedule is harder. I think they'll be more of a target. So those challenges are ahead, but it certainly looks like CJ's up to it.
Yeah, no question about it. And I'm going to throw a little theory out there. I think both of these quarterbacks are going to benefit from having defensive coaches. D'Amico Ryans didn't put it all on CJ. Yeah, he had a great year, but let's build the defense. Let's be able to run the football. Let's play solid. And I know Matt Eberflus really well in Chicago. And I promise you, he's telling Caleb Williams, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to win the game. Just like we played last week, we're going to have great defense. We're going to get the ball back for you and get you some short field. We're going to get some special teams plays and help you do it. Just know what you have to do. Be Caleb Williams, do it, and we're going to be fine. We're going to win games while you're growing.
No doubt. I couldn't agree with you more. And again, that makes the environment that much easier. And I think the other thing that a defensive head coach can do for a young quarterback is they can kind of put their arm around the guy and say, hey, this is what the defense, this is how they see you. And this is what they're going to try to take away. So it's a different perspective than an offensive coach would give that young guy. Now, certainly he needs both perspectives. The offensive coaches certainly are going to share some wisdom. They're going to help him. But sometimes when you see it from the other side and you hear that wisdom from the other side, sometimes that light bulb can go off for that quarterback and can help them, and just in terms of what their expectations are for themselves and what they need to do to win.
No question, no doubt. Well, as we look ahead to Sunday night, what do you think we'll see from Caleb? Where do you think he can make some progress from week 1 to week 2?
Again, I think if they give him those first down throws, I think that's a good thing. I think that if they can move him, and Coach, we talk a lot about progression reads, and your progression read is, hey, I'm going to throw it to this receiver. I'm going to throw it to the tight end. I'm going to throw it to the X. I'm going to throw it to the back. Don't tell me what the coverage is. Just I'm going to go through this progression, and sometimes that can help a young quarterback. Oftentimes, that's the read you would have on a movement type throw. If you came out on a naked, you say, okay, tight end to the over route, back to the tight end. And so I think if they can get them into those type of reads as much as they can, I think that can help the transition. Every offense in the NFL has those. They also have full field reads. They have reads where you're reading the safety. It's all part of it. But early on, if you can err on the side of don't worry so much about the coverage, just worry about the decisions you're making. Find the tight end. Find the X receiver, then throw it to the back. That can help you play faster. And I think that's the biggest thing for him. He was a little indecisive last week. He was trying to process a lot of different things. He was having to deal with disguises. You can take those elements out by just having progression read some things and get him some completions.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to watching him. I think he's going to have that step up in improvement. CJ Stroud didn't get off to a great start last year, week 1, played against a tough Baltimore defense, struggled a little bit. And, there's the stats there. Yeah, he threw for a lot more yards, but had a lot more throws and was sacked 5 times, didn't throw a touchdown pass. So some of the same things. But he, in week 2, took a step, and I think we'll see that from Caleb as well.
No doubt. No doubt. I'm a huge Caleb Williams fan. I do those Notre Dame games, Coach, and last year they were playing USC, and I'm watching the tape of USC leading up to the game. So I probably watched 5 or 6 games, and I am just like, this guy is unstoppable. I mean, I couldn't believe how good he was. And I was talking to Al Golden, the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, before the game, and Al's like, "Oh, we're gonna have a rush plan. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. We're gonna have this. We're gonna force him to go left, and we're gonna disguise the covers this way." And I'm thinking to myself, that's all fine and good. Other teams have been trying to do that too. And this guy he runs around, he just makes plays. Now, Notre Dame really got after him that night, but there still is plenty of evidence on tape that he's been able to function in a lot of different environments and play at a high level. The thing that's really exceptional about this guy, and I think it's extreme to say he could play running back in the NFL, but he has amazing running ability. Amazing ability to cut, and the proverbial put your foot in the ground and go. I mean, he does it like a running back does it. And I do think for them to grow and help him transition, mixing in some quarterback runs and taking advantage of that ability will allow him to settle into a game and have some positive plays. So I think that can be part of what they do as well going forward.
Yeah, I really think, especially this week, that Houston defense is very good. I think we're going to see Caleb Williams with some scramble plays that make a difference and some off schedule plays. And that's where I think he's going to grow a little bit this week and put some pressure on them.
Yeah, he's pretty rare in that regard.
Well, we talked about the quarterbacks now, and we had to pump the brakes on how we judge them and not get too high or too low after week one. Let's look at some teams and where we need to maybe pump the brakes a little bit. And I'm going to start myself with the Dallas Cowboys. Played great, awesome performance, looked very sharp on the road. We all thought the Cleveland Browns tremendous defense, but let me just back up a little bit and say, all right, let's hold on. Let's not put them in the Super Bowl just yet. Maybe Cleveland's not quite as good as we thought. They didn't get great quarterback play. So I want to see the Cowboys next week. Also want to see the Minnesota Vikings. They had an impressive performance against the Giants. Looked great on offense. Sam Darnold, smooth. Kevin O'Connell had a great game plan for him. Brian Flores had that defense rolling, but they'll have a much bigger test this week against the San Francisco 49ers. Any thoughts on those two teams?
Yeah, and Coach, I'm sure you did some version of this for all the years you were coaching, all the great teams you had. I used to always tell our guys that the future of the NFL is written every Monday. So we won yesterday 30-10. Now we're going to the Super Bowl. We lost 30-10. We're the worst team that was ever assembled. And so this is going to happen 17 times over the course of the year. Every Monday, we're going to come in here and we're going to have to deal with this, good or bad. And I always felt like the team that was able to just eliminate all that stuff and just go to work, they're the ones that had the best chance. So we're going to ride this roller coaster every week. And, certainly Dallas goes up to Cleveland. It was impressive. They were dominant on offense. They were dominant on defense. They scored in the kicking game. They really got after them. But it's a long way to go. I think Dallas will benefit from the Giants and the Commanders not being real good right now. I think Philadelphia is the obvious competitor in that division, but there's a lot of games to be played. They're off to a good start. I'm glad they got the Dak Prescott contract worked out. I
Yes.
just think he's an amazing player and an amazing leader. I think that probably gave their team a shot in the arm as well. On the flip side of that, with Cleveland was disappointing to me. Clearly, they're trying to find their way on offense. Deshaun Watson has proven that he's not quite the player that he was in Houston. They have to figure out how to create an environment where he can have success. He's a big part of what they're going to do this year. But the other thing for me is their defense. If you think
Yeah.
about them going down to Houston last year in the playoff game, and then this outing against the Cowboys, the last two outings for this defense have not been very good. Now, again, I'm not overreacting on that side either. I do think they'll find a way to get some rhythm on offense. I do think that defense will stiffen up and some of those playmakers will start to show up a little more. But certainly a disappointing start for them. But again, let's pump the brakes on throwing everybody out of Cleveland too.
Yeah. Speaking of pump the brakes on throwing teams under the bus, I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers. I know everybody is saying this is the worst team in football. They haven't made any improvement over last year. They were terrible. They were awful. And it was a bad game. It was a tough, tough game. Maybe I'm a friend of David Canales and I'm a little bit biased, but it reminds me, I think back to my first game as a head coach. I'm in Tampa Bay. We're playing the Green Bay Packers. And everybody, oh, it's a new year, new day, new coach. We go down 34-3. Couldn't play worse. Brett Favre carves us up. And I'm walking off the field and oh, we're worse. Why did we get you as a coach? We're worse than we were last year. You stink. Go home. And it was an awful feeling. But I told our team we have to grow from that. Well, about 9 weeks later, we go up to Green Bay and we play them nip and tuck all the way through. We lose the game 13-6, but we're a completely different team. We end up winning 5 of our last 7. We knocked the Washington Redskins out of the playoffs, and we grew from that. And I think Carolina has a chance to do the same thing.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and that was a gut punch for them to go down to New Orleans and just really get demolished in every way. And like you said, you gotta kind of put your feet in the ground and stand in there and fight, and you got to learn from the experience. And there will be growing pains in Carolina, and they're going to have to withstand the outside noise as well because people are going to say it's a bad hire. They have a bad team. The quarterback can't
Yeah.
play. all of those stories. And, I think if you're in those roles, you have to draw inspiration from people who have been in those situations before. And, for Dave Canales, hey, looking back at your story. For Bryce
Yeah.
Young, hey, look at how
Yeah.
hard it's been for some of these other quarterbacks who ended up being in the Hall of Fame and how they struggled early on. And they just have to kind of block everything out. And their biggest thing is stay together and improve. Stay together and
Yes.
improve. And the improvement's going to come from honest evaluation of what happened. You can't sugarcoat it. You have to be honest. This was good. This wasn't very good. How do we get this better? And then go to work on the practice field. And I think if they can do that, they're certainly way off of everybody's radar. You look at
Yeah.
every power
Yeah.
ranking in the NFL, they're 32, right? But sometimes that gives you a little edge. And I came to Dallas in 1992, and one of the things that was interesting, 92 was the year we won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
What was interesting to me was the core players who were there in 1989, Jimmy Johnson's first year. They took great pride in the fact that they were 1-15, and that they had kind of turned the whole
Yeah.
thing around, that they had gone through that, and they had taken the lumps, and they had taken the criticism, and they got stronger individually and collectively as a result of it. And then when they stand on the sidelines in the Rose Bowl, holding the trophy over their head, winning 52-17 against the Buffalo Bills, there's an amazing sense of accomplishment having gone through that journey. Now, Carolina's way far away from that, but those situations can be galvanizing for people. And then when you do have success, it's that much more meaningful.
No question about it, Jason. And the lesson in that is that 1 year doesn't define you. So certainly one game shouldn't define you. And you just
Absolutely.
have to put your mind to it and grow and persevere, and you'll be okay. But with that
And
in
in
mind,
war
you have anybody else?
and
Go ahead.
coach, in a world where the outside world's trying to define you by 1 year
Yes,
or trying to define you
absolutely.
by one game. And so again, putting those walls up individually and collectively, I think is a big part of the developmental process.
So after one game, is there anybody else, any other teams you want to pump the brakes on a little bit?
Well, one of the stories that gets so much attention is the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and all of that. And so they travel from New York to San Francisco. They go play one of the best teams in the league, and it was not necessarily an awe-inspiring evening for them. But one of the disappointments was their defense that's been so good got riddled a little bit. San Francisco ran the ball down their throats. San Francisco possessed the ball a ton, but I believe at the end of it, the Jets are going to play good defense like they have. They have too many good players over there, a scheme they believe in, and they've played at a very high level with. And then to have number 8, Aaron Rodgers, back in there, even though he didn't seem like the exact Aaron Rodgers that we saw in Green Bay 5 years ago, it's certainly a comforting feeling for everybody who's a Jets fan to know that he's back and he's capable. Didn't move quite as well in the pocket. I still think he's the smart quarterback with the elite arm. We saw flashes of that throughout the game. I just think they too, if they can kind of handle the noise around them in New York and just settle in and improve each week, I think they have a chance to compete for that division come year's end.
I felt the same way. There was a positive to me that Rodgers made it through the game. He made some great throws. They're going to grow with that. And then defensively, I almost think they got lulled to sleep. Christian McCaffrey's not playing. They're probably
No,
going to throw the ball. And I think they just didn't have that juice that they needed, but they'll bounce back from it.
no doubt. And their defense typically travels. So trust me,
Yes.
they're going to watch that tape and they'll be objective with themselves and say, hey, this wasn't us. And they'll play better this week.
Yeah. And then you've got one other team you want to talk about, right?
Yeah, the other one for me is the Bengals. I thought one of the great wins of the weekend was New England going in there. We were laughing about it. Devin McCourty was teammates with Gerard Mayo for years, and all Mayo was talking about was how his new Nike shoes got some Gatorade on them, and he was wondering if they were going to be okay after the game. And all I could think about when we're talking about shoes was talk about big shoes to fill, right? The tenure that Coach Belichick had in New England is like none other. And now here's Mayo going in there, and everyone thinks they're the 31st worst team in the league, and they should tank the year and they should play for draft picks and all that. And all he did was take his team to Cincinnati. ironically enough, they were on to Cincinnati and they got after the Bengals, and I wouldn't overreact if we're on the Bengals side. They've struggled early on the last few years. I think they're 1-5 in their last 6 openers. It just seems like it takes them a little bit of time to get their rhythm. But to me, for them, it was a disappointing start to have New England come in there at their place and just beat them and really control the game. They didn't have great rhythm on offense. They just didn't play with great juice as a team. So disappointing for them. But again, I think they're going to be a team that rights the ship and they'll start competing the right way, and they'll be in contention at the end of the year for that division as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Not having Jamar Chase early in the week and that distraction that bothered them a little bit. T. Higgins, your number 2 receiver, goes out, and just Friday you realize you're not going to have him. So there'll be a different offense this week against Kansas City for sure. But I was happy for Gerard Mayo. Really good young man, great dedication. He wants to be great. He wants his team to be great. And I visited there this offseason. I know you've made some trips to different places. I sensed the passion that these guys had and the belief they had in Gerard, and it played out Sunday.
I think in a good way for them in New England, without having asked him this, but I would bet Gerard Mayo would say the most influential football person in his life has been Bill Belichick.
No
Right? He
question.
played for him. He coached for him. Each and every day, Bill Belichick taught him what it's like to be a championship football player and coach. And so the dynamic is all that incredible wisdom from Coach Belichick, and then Gerard's own stamp on it, right? A younger guy who played in the NFL. So now we can take all this wisdom and then kind of synthesize it and then share it to the players and create an environment that's specific to him, that has his own stamp on it. So I think in a lot of ways it can be the best of both worlds. He's a young coach. He's going to learn. There are going to be a lot of things that come up here over the next few weeks that, are new experiences for him and that he's going to handle well and maybe not so well. And, but he seems to me to be the kind of guy who learns as he goes, learns from his experiences and grows from them. So I think it's a good dynamic there in New England and a heck of a start for those guys.
Learning and growing. That was the theme for week 1, and we saw some good games. We're going to have a great game in Houston, and I can't wait for that one. But are there any other games in week 2 that kind of have you excited?
It's a good question, Coach. The game Thursday night is the one that kind of jumps out to me. Buffalo going down to Miami. I think Miami's a really interesting team. And I think about them a little bit. You remember watching the NBA in the 80s? I loved the Lakers. And the Lakers were Showtime, right? They scored 120
Yep.
points and they were up and down the court and there was nobody like them, and they'd win the West. Their record would be 62-20, and they had the best record in the NBA and led the league in scoring and all that. Then they go play the Celtics in the playoffs, and the Celtics would slow the whole thing down.
Yeah.
Force them to play half court. They'd force these guys to make shots in critical moments. The scores would always be under 100 points. And it was a different game. And it took a lot of years for the Lakers to figure out that they had to be tougher. And they had to figure out how to beat the Celtics, particularly at their place, in a different style of game. And when they broke through, they broke through. And then they started winning all their championships. And to me, I feel a little bit that same dynamic with Miami. They're so good on offense. They're the greatest show on grass, and they scored 70 points in a game and all of that. But then they have to go play some tough games in their division in Buffalo at the end of the year when it's snowing, and go on the road to Kansas City in the playoffs. And they're a different team. They're not a tough enough team yet, and that's how they have to break through. Everyone knows how dynamic they can be on offense. But can they be a team that wins different ways in tough environments against good teams? And, they played at home the other day against Jacksonville. I get all that. But what I was pleased for them was it was a different kind of win. It was a little bit of an ugly win. The defense had to make the big play, the punch out, Javon Holland as the runners going into the end zone. And then the offense had to respond. And then they had to win in a field goal late. And they didn't score 70 points. They scored 20 points. And So for me, I keep looking at them as a team that, boy, they're capable, but are they tough enough to break through? And I love what Mike McDaniel said after the game. He just said, "Hey, we wouldn't have won this game the last couple of years," and that's a big step for that team. So it'll be curious. The game's going to be down there; it's not on the road, but it's going to be curious against a division opponent early on in the season if they can kind of continue to show that kind of mental toughness. Certainly against a guy like Josh Allen, who was one of the elite players in the league again last week up there for the Bills.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that one too. We were there the last game of the season last year. If Miami wins, they're going to win the division. They're going to have home playoff games. If they lose, they're going to have to go to Kansas City. And Buffalo went down there and took that game from them. So this is a big game. And I know these Dolphin players have been waiting for this rematch all summer. So it's going to be great.
And coach,
I'm
I'm
looking
sure
at,
you've had a ton. I'm sure you've had a ton of teams that kind of were hitting that ceiling, right? And like, how are
yep.
we going to kind of break through? And for whatever reason, we're falling short, and then somehow you kind of break through that ceiling and take it to the next level. And I think that's where their team is. And it'll be curious to see if they can respond.
Yep, for us, you're exactly right. I was in Indianapolis. We kept losing to the Patriots. Finally, we had to go up there on a Monday night and beat them. And once we beat them in New England, our confidence level, everything just skyrocketed. And you're right. That's what Miami needs, I think. Need a
Yeah, it's
big
amazing,
win.
isn't it?
Well, the game I'm looking at is two other undefeated teams, 1-0 teams, the San Francisco 49ers and the Minnesota Vikings. Both teams coming off impressive wins. Um, for the Niners, Christian McCaffrey may not play again this week. Jordan Mason had 147 yards, big game. Brandon Ayuk wasn't quite himself. He'll be in practice all week and probably get more of him. Their defense was exceptional against Aaron Rodgers. They're going to take that defense on the road against Sam Darnold and the Vikings, who looked great against the Giants. Darnold only threw 5 incomplete passes. Aaron Jones gave the running game a big lift, and Brian Flores had that defense playing lights out. So I am looking forward to that one. See if the Vikings are a little bit better than we thought. See if San Francisco can take it on the road.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game, and that environment up there, as you know, it's loud in Minnesota, and those fans get into it when they're blowing that horn and doing all that stuff. I mean, it can be a tough place to play, and I think it's going to be important for the 49ers to have that same formula they had last week against the Jets. If they can run the ball as much as they did and as effectively as they did, it's going to quiet the whole thing down. And if they get into a game where Minnesota is able to stop the run on early downs, and Brock Purdy, for as well as he's played, he doesn't want to go up to the line of scrimmage on third down, dealing with crowd noise, dealing with all those looks that Brian Flores is going to present to them. That's not the kind of game they want to play up there. And so if they can play their game, run it, take some pressure off the quarterback, keep Sam Darnold and those guys off the field, I think they have a real good shot. I think the 49ers are a better team. The question is, can they play better than Minnesota at the Vikings place?
Well, it's going to be a fun week too, for sure. And we are going to have a great one in Houston, the Texans and the Bears. And we want to finish up this podcast, Jason, with some remembrances from you.
Yeah, Coach, 9/11, 2001 was obviously one of the most tragic days in our country's history. And, I'd love to hear your story, but I was playing for the Giants at the time. And we played a Monday night game in Denver on Monday night, September 10th. And we lost the game, and we were flying back to New York. And we didn't get back into New York until, I don't know, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I actually was living in New York City at the time, and went in to my apartment, and we're trying to sleep because it's a Tuesday now, and you're getting ready for the next day. We're gonna have practice and on to the next week. And I'll never forget. It was a beautiful day, and I finally got to sleep about 7:30 in the morning, and there were all these fire trucks going by our apartment, and I'm like, "What is going on here?" And sure enough, we got a call from a good buddy of mine, Eric Bjornson, one of my old teammates from the Cowboys, and said, "You guys okay?" We're like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Turn the TV on." And sure enough, a day that again, one of the most tragic in our country's history, was unfolding. And, it was just a crazy time. If you remember, I know you were coaching, um, down there in Tampa at the time, but, just the idea of, um, we're gonna postpone these games. We're not gonna play the games this week. And then we didn't play again till the following week. And, when you're playing for the Giants after 9/11, there's a lot of responsibility that you felt. We spent a lot of time down at ground zero when we visited, fire stations and police stations and trying to support families and all of that. But, we went to Kansas City to play 2 weeks later, and I'll never forget it. Kansas City, one of the toughest places to play. The crowd is hard and all of that. And, they really embraced our team. And it was very emotional before the game. I mean, guys were crying during the anthem. And sure enough, the long personal story is that was the first game that I was the holder. Morton Anderson was the kicker. And so I had spent a couple of weeks. It's the first time I was already been a backup holder. It was the first time I had been the starting holder. And sure enough, the game came down in the fourth quarter. We're going to have to kick a field goal to ice it. And I'm like, oh God, make sure you get this ball down, and we kick this thing through. And we're able to do that. And after the game, Coach Fossil, Jim Fossil was our coach, and he got everybody together. We all had our NYPD and our NYFD hats on, and we took that picture in the Kansas City Chiefs locker room. It's really one of my favorite team pictures I've ever was involved in because of the emotions of the time.
Yeah.
And what everybody was going through in New York, and how for 3 hours on a Sunday, a couple weeks later, we felt like we did our part to help all these people who are grieving so much kind of forget about what they were going through. And certainly everyone's still feeling the effects of that. But it's a very memorable picture. If you look at that picture, a lot of different people are in there.
Yeah.
There's Morton Anderson. Sean Payton was our offensive coordinator at the time, and a lot of other guys. So certainly a great memory, that moment right there during a very, very tragic time in our country's history.
No, you touched on it, and I had the same memory. The game's canceled. You have to wait 2 weeks to play. And as a coach, you're always preparing, and players are preparing for the next game. And everybody was thinking about that game. But everybody with our Tampa Bay Buccaneer team, we could not wait for that national anthem, that game. And that's my memory. Guys standing there singing the national anthem, saying, this is what it's all about. Yeah, we want to win the game, but we want to stand for this national anthem.
No doubt. And it was emotional. I get emotional thinking about it right now. I mean, just, everything that people in our country went through, and the lives that were lost, and how everyone rallied together. It was an amazing time, and certainly one that we never would want to have happen again. But I do think we responded the right way to it. And unique being in the NFL at the time, unique being in New York, to be able to in some ways hopefully take some people away from the misery they were going through.
Great memories, great story. Thanks for bringing that to our attention, Jason. I can't even imagine what it was like being in New York. It impacted us in Tampa that day, but being in New York had to be a whole different level.
Yeah, I can remember the Saturday after 9/11, we went down to ground zero as a team. And, we were just trying to do whatever we could. We're giving, the responders water and whatever we could provide, but it was just so eye-opening. You think about the lives lost and just the tragedy of the whole thing. But again, how everyone was unified. And I saw this morning on the news the clip of President Bush when he went down to ground zero, and just how amazing he was as a leader for our
Yeah.
country at the time. And so many people stepped up and helped keep everyone together. And it was again such a tragedy, and the lives lost you can't even imagine. But I do think we responded the right way
Yeah.
collectively, and certainly an inspirational time in many ways for so many people.
No doubt. Brought us together, and no question about it. So this has been awesome. Great
Yeah.
time reminiscing, looking forward. And this is FNIA Podcast. We are going to see you this Sunday in Houston, and looking forward to it, Jason.
Thanks, Coach. You're the best.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.